Pit, pit, pit.
Go out the other side. Hey, go out the other side. Go out the other side.
The circle of the car, like whenever I try to like.
The circle of the car?
No, like whenever I
682,
try to.
10:15 one timing, clear the air. 682, 10:15 one time. Okay, so you are being placed under arrest for DUI.
The last thing Raheem 350 Heem Bacon said before collapsing under the flashing lights of the Jade Fox Lounge parking lot was something no one expected, a desperate cry for his mother. Blood was pooling beneath his body, careless in its crimson spread. As he gasped and stumbled, spectators froze, cell phones blurred in trembling hands, while horns and sirens in the distance blurred together in what would be his final soundtrack. The celebration had become a funeral in slow motion. Now, rewind. Because Raheem's story didn't start with tragedy that night, it started in a small Florida neighborhood in Lakeland, with big dreams born out of tougher odds. It began with music, responsibility, ambition, and the belief that coming from where he came from didn't have to define where he would go. Raheem Bacon was 25, a rising rapper in Lakeland, known among friends and followers as 350 Heem. He carried with him not just lyrics and beats, but the weight of two young children, a mother's relentless faith, and a brother who'd already made his mark in the NBA. His music was raw and hopeful, sinew and soul braided together. He grew up playing basketball in high school, graduating in 2016, the same way many kids chase dreams with a ball, but for Raheem, the mic began to pull him more than the court ever could. After high school, Raheem became a father first, his daughter, then a son, and those roles shaped him as much as any studio session ever could. His mother, Kenny Crawford, tried to steer him towards safety, pushing for community college in Tallahassee, hoping distance from Lakeland's harsh edges would give him the space to grow. By 2021, his music was drawing attention. He signed with Motown Records, released Major League, and recorded tracks that spoke of his life, love, pain, ambition, and the constant tension between where he came from and where he wanted to go. He was more than a rapper. To many, he was a beacon in a city where escape felt distant. Everything seemed aligned toward that night in late July 2023. His newest mixtape, Taking Chances 3, had just dropped. The release party at Jade Fox Lounge was billed as a turning point. Lights, cameras, friends, family. A night to mark that his voice had finally broken through. Fans streamed in. Social media buzzed. The city seemed to share his hope. Just after midnight, however, something inside the lounge snapped. A confrontation meant for perhaps a punch. Maybe only words unfolded between two women at the entrance. Jamila Johnson and her mother, Regina Orr, on one side, and Raheem's mother, Kenny Crawford, on the other. The dispute? They hadn't paid the cover charge. Tempers flared. The party's warm hum began to fray. Inside, the music barely masked the tension. Patrons exchanged nervous looks as security lurked nearer. Outside, the parking lot lights flickered over cars and palm trees, and the shadows of people gathered, milling around. Laughter and clinking glasses still sounded, but under it all, a current of something dangerous. At around 1:40 a.m., the conflict spilled outside. Regina Orr struck Kenny Crawford in the face inside the club. Others pushed. Shouts. Instincts and adrenaline took over as the crowd pressed toward the exits. In a matter of seconds, the party fractured. The parking lot, once filled with promise and loud music, became edged with chaos. Then came the gunfire. Raheem, witnesses say, raised a 9mm and shot Regina Orr. Seconds later, Jamila Johnson, 23 years old, drew a .40 caliber Glock long reported stolen in 2015 and fired back. 2 shots, according to authorities, struck Rahim. He fell, blood on the asphalt, his breath fragmented. Regina Orr lay nearby, critically injured. The music died. A celebration died. Someone, possibly a bystander named Isaac Harris, dragged Rahim by his car door and drove him toward Lakeland Regional Health Medical Center. Racing through traffic, red lights skipped, heart pounding, but the bullets had done their damage. By the time he arrived, the young man who had promised so much was pronounced dead. The room that could have celebrated his arrival instead held only quiet. In the aftermath came the arguments. Who fired first? Was it self-defense, Jamila Johnson then acting to protect her mother, or something more complicated? Investigators said video evidence showed Rahim shot first. They matched the bullets that killed him to the Glock Johnson had been carrying. But Rahim's weapon, his 9mm, was never found. Detectives believe someone at the scene took it, burns left on the pavement from shell casings, but the tool behind them was gone. Prosecutors, after reviewing the evidence, decided not to file murder charges against Johnson. The state attorney's office said the law did not support homicide charges in her case, given that she fired in response to a threat her mother being shot. Instead, she faced lesser charges: carrying a concealed firearm, tampering with evidence by discarding the gun. But while the legal record was changed, the grief remained. Lakeland, Rahim's family, his fans, they were left with unanswered questions. How did his weapon go missing? Was justice served when the life ended that night? And if the video showed one version, what of the stories others told of looks exchanged, warnings unheeded, proximity, fear? There's so much more to this story that will leave you speechless. If you find it worth listening to, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. The weeks leading up to the tragedy seemed, from the outside, almost ordinary. Friends of Rahim, who many knew by his rap name, 350 Hem Bacon, said he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who believed his time was finally arriving. In music, he had begun to draw small crowds and build a following on social media. On Instagram, short clips of him in the studio, often surrounded by smoke and laughter, painted the picture of a young man on the verge of breaking through. But behind the curated snapshots was a more complicated reality. A life torn between the promise of fame and the weight of choices that had already set him on a dangerous path. Those closest to him noticed the duality. By day, Rahim spoke with wide-eyed ambition about leaving behind the streets, focusing on his craft, and building a legacy through his music. By night, however, whispers circulated that he was still tangled in the very street dynamics he claimed he wanted to escape. For young men growing up in neighborhoods like his, those ties rarely loosen easily. The same friends who offered encouragement at his shows sometimes knew far more about the hidden conflicts brewing in the background, conflicts that would eventually spill out with deadly consequences. In interviews that surfaced after his death, relatives painted a portrait of a boy who had once been soft-spoken and shy, but hardened by experiences that demanded he prove himself again and again. His mother remembered him as someone with a sense of humor so disarming that it could light up a room, and yet she admitted that she often feared the influences around him. "It's like he was chasing 2 lives at once," one cousin said. The life he dreamed of, and the one he thought he couldn't let go of. The collision of those two worlds became more apparent in the final days. Raheem had been working on new material, describing it to one friend as, "my realest work yet." The lyrics were darker, tinged with paranoia, and full of allusions to betrayal. Some interpreted the words as pure artistry, while others felt they reflected genuine threats in his orbit. He rapped about loyalty, enemies, and the thin line between love and hate, a line he seemed to walk daily. To some, these were just bars. To those closer to him, they were warnings. On the night before his final performance, he was spotted at a gathering that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Accounts of that night vary. Some say it was a small get-together at a friend's house, while others describe it as a raucous party that ended with arguments and thinly veiled threats. What is consistent is that Raheem appeared both confident and restless, laughing one minute, pacing the next. Those who knew him best say he looked like someone carrying a secret. Whether that secret was a fear for his safety or simply the weight of his growing ambition remains unclear. When dawn broke, the city woke to an ordinary day, but for Raheem, it would be his last. Investigators later pieced together a timeline showing that he moved between several locations, making phone calls that hinted at tension. One witness reported that Raheem spoke about handling something before his show. Others recalled he seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly as if waiting for a message that never came. These fragments of testimony painted the picture of a young man standing on the edge of something: success or destruction. By late afternoon, Raheem arrived at the venue where he was set to perform. It wasn't the grand stage of a superstar, but for him, it was significant. The place was packed tighter than expected, buzzing with anticipation. Family members who showed up said they had never seen him more determined. As the lights dimmed and the crowd roared, he stepped on stage with an energy that suggested he was ready to claim the future he had long dreamed of. He was smiling, like he really believed this was his night, one friend recalled. For nearly an hour, Raheem commanded the room. Each song seemed to land with more force than the last, and the audience responded with shouts and raised phones. Videos posted online later would capture moments of pure electricity. Raheem throwing his head back in triumph, sweat shining under the lights, the crowd chanting his name. If there was fear in him, he buried it deep under the rhythm and the roar. For those watching, it felt like the breakthrough performance he had always promised. But destiny has a cruel way of turning triumph into tragedy in an instant. As the performance ended, Raheem disappeared backstage. Witnesses said he looked elated, already planning his next moves. But within the hour, chaos erupted. Gunfire shattered the celebration, sending people scrambling for cover. Screams filled the night as panic replaced joy. When the dust settled, Raheem lay fatally wounded, his dreams silenced before they could fully take form. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, police sirens, and desperate attempts to save him. Friends wept as paramedics tried in vain to resuscitate him. The scene was chaotic, heartbreaking, and surreal. One minute we were celebrating him, the next minute he was gone, said one devastated friend. It didn't feel real. Detectives arrived quickly, trying to preserve the crime scene. But the sheer number of people present made it nearly impossible to piece together a clear picture of what had happened. Some witnesses claimed the shots came from inside the venue. Others swore they came from the street outside. Rumors swirled immediately, talk of old grudges, jealous rivals, and betrayals that had been simmering for months. The theories multiplied faster than facts could be verified. For Rahim's family, the news was shattering. His mother's sobs echoed as she arrived at the scene, her grief captured in fragments of shaky cell phone footage later posted online. "He had so much ahead of him," she cried. As loved ones tried to comfort her, the pain of losing a son was compounded by the public spectacle of it all. The flashing cameras, the viral videos, the endless speculation. His death was not only a private loss but a public tragedy, dissected by strangers who never knew the boy behind the name. In the days that followed, candlelight vigils appeared on street corners, with friends and fans gathering to honor his memory. Murals began to take shape, spray-painted tributes of his face smiling against a backdrop of angel wings. Social media was flooded with clips of his last performance, each caption more haunting than the last. "He went out on top," some wrote. But for his family, there was no comfort in that idea. To them, he was not a rapper, not a street legend. He was Rahim, a son, a cousin, a friend whose laughter once filled their homes. As detectives pushed forward, they faced the daunting task of untangling rumor from reality. Was his murder the result of an old rivalry, a targeted attack, or was it a moment of senseless violence in a world where lives are cut short far too easily? Every answer seemed to lead to more questions. The truth, it seemed, was buried beneath layers of silence and fear. And so the story of Rahim, 350 Hem Bacon, took on a haunting shape. A young man caught between the promise of greatness and the pull of forces he could not escape. His final performance was supposed to be a celebration of what he could become. Instead, it became the closing chapter of a life that ended too soon. But the lingering question remains. Was Rahim's death the inevitable result of choices made long ago? Or was it the tragic silencing of an artist who might have changed everything if only he had been given more time? The investigation into Rahim's death began under a cloud of confusion. Within hours, rumors were spreading faster than the detectives could gather evidence. Social media exploded with theories. Some claimed a jealous rival in the local rap scene had orchestrated the shooting. Others pointed to street disputes, stretching back months. For investigators, sorting through the noise was like chasing shadows. Each lead seemed urgent, yet none held up under scrutiny. Witnesses were plentiful, but reliable accounts were scarce. Many had been too focused on enjoying the performance to notice what unfolded in the chaos afterward. Others, fearful of retaliation, remained silent. Detectives noted a troubling pattern. Those who did speak often contradicted one another. One attendee insisted the shots rang out from a dark sedan parked just outside the venue. Another swore they saw a figure slip through a side door moments before the gunfire erupted. The inconsistencies made it nearly impossible to establish a clear narrative. Still, the police pressed on. Ballistic evidence was collected from the scene. Shell casings marked with small yellow placards across the asphalt. Surveillance cameras from nearby businesses were pulled, though most provided only grainy footage of panicked crowds scattering in every direction. Inside the department, detectives pieced together a timeline, trying to identify who had the motive, the means, and the opportunity. What quickly emerged was the possibility that Rahim's death had little to do with music, and everything to do with the unresolved conflicts of his personal life. Investigators discovered that he had received a series of text messages in the days leading up to his final show, cryptic warnings that suggested someone was watching him. One message simply read, "Don't get too comfortable." Another, "You know what you did." Whether these were idle threats, attempts to intimidate, or genuine warnings of violence, detectives could not say. But they cast a chilling light on the days before the tragedy. Family members insisted Rahim had no enemies. To them, he was the dreamer who had spent countless hours scribbling lyrics in worn notebooks, headphones wrapped around his neck, chasing a future through music. But friends painted a more complex picture. Several admitted that Rahim, despite his aspirations, had struggled to fully detach from the street circles he grew up in. For some, success was a way out. For Rahim, it appeared to be a tightrope walk between two worlds, one pulling him forward, the other dragging him back. Detectives soon learned of a confrontation at a party just weeks before the shooting. According to those present, an argument had erupted between Rahim and another young man over money owed and perceived disrespect. Voices rose, threats were exchanged, but nothing came of it that night. Still, the memory lingered. When investigators revisited the attendees, several admitted they feared the argument might have set the stage for revenge. But without cooperation from key witnesses, the trail ran cold. Meanwhile, the public narrative spun out of control. News outlets framed the story as yet another young rapper cut down by the violence he so often rapped about. Comment sections brimmed with cynicism. He lived that life. What did he expect? Others lamented the cycle of talent lost to senseless violence. The truth of who Rahim really was seemed buried beneath speculation, stereotype, and half-truths. For his family, the coverage was almost unbearable. His mother, exhausted by grief, pleaded for people to remember her son as more than a headline. He was more than a rapper, more than what people are saying. "He was my baby," she cried during a local news interview. But the camera lights didn't soften, and the questions didn't stop. To many viewers, Rahim was already frozen as a cautionary tale. Inside the community, however, his death left deeper scars. The corner store he frequented hung posters in his honor, while local teens blasted his music through Bluetooth speakers as a form of tribute. To them, he wasn't a headline, he was a symbol of what could have been. Candlelight vigils continued for weeks, each one drawing larger crowds, each one a mix of grief and frustration. People prayed, people cried, people demanded answers. But answers remained elusive. Behind closed doors, detectives grew increasingly frustrated. Each time they felt close to a breakthrough, silence returned. The fear of retaliation loomed large in neighborhoods where cooperation with law enforcement could carry deadly consequences. Potential witnesses changed their stories or vanished altogether. It was as if the truth had been swallowed by an unspoken pact of survival. Yet, there were still clues. Surveillance footage eventually captured a blurry image of a vehicle circling the block. Minutes before the shots rang out, a dark-colored sedan, headlights off. Investigators traced the license plate, only to discover it was stolen. Days later, the car was found abandoned and burned on the outskirts of town. It was a chilling reminder that whoever had orchestrated Rahim's death knew how to cover their tracks. But detectives refused to give up. They leaned into digital forensics, combing through Rahim's phone records, his social media accounts, and the torrent of messages that flooded in after his passing. What they uncovered was startling. Buried among the condolences and tributes were private exchanges hinting at escalating tensions, arguments over loyalty, money, and betrayal. One exchange in particular stood out. a heated back and forth with someone known only by an alias, ending with the words, "This isn't over." Who was behind that message? Detectives couldn't yet prove it was connected, but the tone was undeniable. It painted a picture of someone who felt wronged, someone who wanted Rahim to pay. Even as investigators pieced together these fragments, time worked against them. The longer the case remained unsolved, the colder the trail became. Pressure mounted from the public, the media, and Rahim's grieving family. Each day without answers felt like an insult to his memory, and yet, the bigger question loomed over everything. Was Rahim's death the result of a targeted plan rooted in old grudges, or was it the chaotic outcome of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? The silence from those who might know the truth suggested fear, but fear of what, or whom? As the weeks dragged on, the investigation into Rahim's death took on an almost suffocating weight. Every detail seemed important, every silence suspicious. Detectives spent long nights poring over case files, chasing down whispers, and replaying the grainy surveillance footage in the hope that something, anything, might break the case open. But in the world Rahim had come from, truth was a fragile thing, easily hidden behind fear and silence. One name began to surface more than once. A young man with ties to the same neighborhood, known for his quick temper and his reputation for settling disputes violently. He had clashed with Rahim in the past, though the exact reasons remained murky. Some said it was over money, others suggested it had to do with respect or the lack of it. In communities where reputation was everything, even a perceived slight could spiral into deadly consequences. Detectives zeroed in, hoping this could be their first solid lead, but when they attempted to bring him in for questioning, he vanished. Neighbors claimed they hadn't seen him for days. His family refused to cooperate. It was as though he had simply melted into the shadows. For investigators, the sudden disappearance was suspicious, but it was not proof. Without hard evidence, they couldn't name him a suspect, at least, not officially. Meanwhile, Rahim's loved ones struggled to make sense of the void left behind. His mother rarely left her home, consumed by grief that seemed to deepen with each passing day. Friends who once laughed with him in recording sessions found themselves avoiding the studio altogether, the silence too heavy to bear. His music, once a source of hope, now played like a haunting echo of what had been stolen. Every lyric felt like prophecy, every beat a reminder of unfinished dreams. In the community, frustration grew. People demanded justice, but few were willing to risk stepping forward. "We all know what happened," one resident admitted quietly to a reporter, but saying it out loud? That's a death sentence. It was a chilling reflection of the unspoken code that governed the streets. Silence was survival. And in Rahim's case, that silence was deafening. The detectives, however, weren't ready to give up. They turned their attention back to the digital breadcrumbs Rahim had left behind. Social media, often a double-edged sword, became a treasure trove of clues. Buried among thousands of posts, they discovered a troubling pattern. Rahim had been engaged in a series of back-and-forth exchanges with rival artists, some of whom openly mocked him, others who issued veiled threats in their lyrics and captions. One video in particular caught investigators' attention, posted just days before the murder. It featured a rival rapper freestyling lines that seemed to allude to Rahim directly. "Talk slick. End up with chalk on the street. Ain't no future for you if you keep playing with me." Was it bravado or a warning? In hip-hop culture, such lyrical shots were common, often serving as fuel for competition rather than actual violence. But in this case, the line between art and reality seemed to blur dangerously. Detectives reached out to this rival, hauling him in for questioning. He denied any involvement, claiming the lyrics were nothing more than performance. "It's rap," he said flatly. "It's not real life." Without physical evidence tying him to the scene, detectives were forced to let him go. But the encounter left a lingering unease because in Raheem's world, words had consequences, and the threats woven into music often foreshadowed real bloodshed. As the investigation stumbled, the media circled like vultures. Headlines painted Raheem as yet another casualty of a violent culture, a narrative his family fiercely rejected. He was more than that, his mother repeated through tears. He had dreams, he had talent. Don't let them reduce him to this. But the media machine rarely slowed for nuance, and the story of Raheem's death quickly became entangled with the broader narrative of violence in the rap world. Meanwhile, detectives caught a small break. Forensic analysis of the shell casings recovered at the scene revealed that the weapon used in Raheem's murder had been connected to a prior shooting months earlier. That case, still unsolved, involved another young man with ties to the same neighborhood. A man who, coincidentally, had also been linked to Raheem's circle. The overlap was too significant to ignore. Detectives began to explore the possibility that Raheem's death was not an isolated act, but part of a larger chain of retaliations. Still, proving it was another matter. The gun was missing, the suspects were silent, and the witnesses remained locked in fear. The case felt like quicksand. Every step forward pulled the investigators deeper into uncertainty. Through it all, Raheem's music gained a second life. Songs that once drew modest attention now racked up thousands of streams. His voice echoing across platforms like a ghost refusing to be silenced. Fans dissected his lyrics, searching for hidden meanings, convinced he had predicted his own death. In one track, he rapped about betrayal, about enemies hiding in plain sight, about not living to see 30. Listeners shared these lines endlessly, treating them as eerie confessions. But were they prophecy, or simply the reflections of a young man shaped by an environment where death was never far away? For his family, this posthumous fame was bittersweet. Yes, the world was finally hearing his music, but it was at the cost of his life. His mother often sat alone, listening to his songs on repeat, tears streaming as his voice filled the silence. "He should be here," she whispered during one vigil. "Not just in the music. He should be here." As months passed, frustration hardened into anger. Community leaders demanded more from the police. Activists organized marches, holding signs that read "Justice for Raheem." But justice remained elusive, hidden in the spaces between silence and fear. Detectives knew the truth was within reach. They could feel it. But each time they tried to close the gap, the walls closed in tighter, and so the haunting question lingers. Was Raheem's killer someone from his past, seeking revenge for old wounds? Or was it someone much closer? Someone he trusted, who saw in his rising fame not inspiration but a threat. By the 5th month of the investigation, frustration had set in on all sides. For detectives, the case had become a maze of half-truths, elusive suspects, and leads that evaporated the moment they were touched. For Raheem's family, the waiting was torture. His mother kept calling the police station weekly, sometimes daily, asking if there was progress, if there was a name, if there was even a whisper of an arrest. Each time, the answers were the same: "We're still working on it." In the streets, however, whispers had not stopped. Everyone seemed to know something, but no one wanted to say it outright. There were rumors of a debt, rumors of a woman caught in the middle, rumors that Rahim's success had rubbed the wrong people the wrong way. Some said he had been targeted because his lyrics had hit too close to home. Others believed it was simply envy that a young man from their neighborhood, with real talent, had dared to climb higher than those around him. One anonymous tip finally pushed the case in a new direction. A caller, refusing to give a name, claimed they had seen a figure fleeing the scene of the shooting, slipping into the dark sedan that was later found torched. The caller described the man as tall, slim, and wearing a distinctive jacket, one that matched photos detectives had already seen circulating online of a known associate in Rahim's circle. This was not just some stranger. It was someone Rahim had once called a friend. The revelation hit investigators like a spark in dry grass. Could the killer have been someone close to Rahim? Someone who had gained his trust only to betray him in the end? It was not uncommon. Many cases of violence in the rap world stemmed not from faceless enemies, but from friendships soured, alliances broken, and betrayals that cut deeper than rivalries ever could. Detectives quietly began digging into this associate's past. His name, withheld publicly at the time, was already familiar to law enforcement. He had prior arrests for weapons charges and had been questioned in connection to other acts of violence, though nothing had ever stuck. On social media, he often posted cryptic messages about loyalty and betrayal, some of which seemed eerily timed around Rahim's death. The more investigators looked, the more the pieces began to align. Phone records placed him near the venue on the night of the shooting. Financial records revealed sudden, unexplained cash deposits in the days after Rahim's murder, and when detectives tracked down the burned-out sedan, they found traces of DNA on the steering wheel, traces that, when processed, provided a partial match to this very associate. Yet even with all of this, the case remained frustratingly delicate. The evidence was circumstantial, not ironclad. Without a witness willing to testify, prosecutors knew a trial could collapse under scrutiny. The streets had a way of protecting their own, and silence, once again, stood as the strongest shield against justice. Meanwhile, Rahim's name only grew larger in death. His mixtapes spread beyond his city, carried by social media algorithms that fed off tragedy. Music blogs wrote glowing tributes, calling him a star gone too soon. His face appeared on murals not just in his neighborhood, but across state lines, painted by fans who had never met him, yet felt connected to his story. His death had transformed him into something more than an artist. He had become a symbol, though what he symbolized depended on who was telling the story. For his mother, it was unbearable. She began attending community meetings, pleading for answers, sometimes shouting through tears that someone out there knew the truth. "Don't let my son's name be forgotten. Don't let his killer walk free," she begged. Her voice cracked, but her determination never wavered. The emotional weight spilled into the police department too. Detectives admitted, off the record, that the case had haunted them. "You don't forget a mother crying like that," one said quietly. "You want to give her closure. You want to give her justice. But it feels like everyone's working against you." Then came another twist. Months after the shooting, a video surfaced online. It wasn't a news clip or a music video. It was grainy cell phone footage shot in the moments after Rahim's performance. In the background, among the chaos, a figure could be seen moving quickly toward the exit. Pausing the video revealed the outline of the same distinctive jacket described by the anonymous caller. For detectives, it was a breakthrough. The video was far from definitive. It was shaky, blurred, and partially obstructed. But it added another layer of credibility to their theory. The associate had been there. The question was, why? As the case advanced, detectives began to suspect a motive more personal than the public knew. Interviews with those in Rahim's inner circle hinted at tension between the two men. One claimed Rahim had recently cut ties with the associate, refusing to bring him along as his music career began to grow. Another suggested there had been arguments over money specifically, who deserved a share of the small but growing profits from Rahim's shows and streams. Envy, betrayal, money. It was a cocktail that had fueled countless tragedies before. Could it have fueled Rahim's? As detectives built their case, the community grew restless. The question on everyone's lips was the same. If the police knew so much, why hadn't anyone been arrested? For prosecutors, the answer was simple. They needed more. A shaky video and partial DNA would not be enough to secure a conviction. They needed someone to talk, someone who had been there, someone willing to risk everything. But in Rahim's world, talking came at a price. And so, once again, silence reigned. The investigation teetered between progress and collapse, haunted by the possibility that justice might never be served. The associate remained free, his social media posts as cryptic as ever, while Rahim's family lived each day in the shadow of unanswered questions. And so we're left with the chilling possibility. Was Rahim betrayed not by an enemy, but by someone he once trusted? Someone he once called brother? Or is the truth still hiding in the shadows, waiting to reveal that the real killer is someone no one ever suspected? The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Yet the weight of the decision rippled far beyond the four walls. Families of both the victim and the accused sat in tense stillness, their lives forever divided by choices that could never be undone. The judge's words carried a finality that closed one chapter but left countless wounds open. Justice, as the system defined it, had been delivered. But for those who had lived through the nightmare, justice felt like a word too small for the devastation left behind. As the sentence was announced, whispers filled the room. Some felt relief, others anguish, and some questioned whether the punishment could ever equal the pain. Outside the courthouse, reporters clutched their microphones, ready to broadcast the outcome to a waiting public. The case had become more than just a trial. It had transformed into a symbol of everything fragile about human choices, relationships, and the thin line between control and chaos. In the weeks that followed, the story continued to echo online. Comment sections, podcasts, and community forums dissected every detail, often with more passion than accuracy. Some painted the accused as a monster beyond redemption. Others saw a complex figure consumed by poor decisions and unchecked impulses. The victim's memory was honored in vigils and fundraisers, their name etched into hashtags that sought to turn tragedy into awareness. But beneath the surface, the core question lingered: had this all been preventable? Or was it simply the grim collision of fate and human failure? What haunted most people was the what-ifs. What if someone had intervened earlier? What if the warning signs had been taken seriously? What if society had systems strong enough to catch someone before they unraveled? These questions had no clear answers, And maybe that was what made the story so unforgettable. It wasn't just about one person's crime or another's loss, it was about the reflection staring back at all of us when we asked how far anyone could go when pushed past their limits. For investigators, closing the case didn't bring closure. They replayed the evidence, the confessions, and the inconsistencies that never quite fit together. There were theories still left unexplored, possibilities that might never surface. Even now, the case files sit in drawers and digital archives. But for those who worked the front lines, the images and sounds remain etched in memory. The truth, they realized, is rarely neat. It bleeds at the edges, blurs in the middle, and sometimes slips away entirely, and that's where the story leaves us. Suspended between answers and doubts, justice and tragedy, fact and mystery. The world will move on, headlines will fade, and new stories will take their place. But for the families, for the community, and for those of us who bear witness, this story is not just another entry in the annals of true crime. It is a reminder of how quickly lives can shatter, how deeply choices can cut, and how fragile the line between tomorrow and never again truly is. So the question remains: when justice feels incomplete, when truth seems only half revealed, can there ever really be an ending? Or do stories like this continue to haunt us, unfinished, until the day we choose to see ourselves within them?